Right guys, Mark Crossfield here. We're going to talk hitting up at the ball with a driver or hitting down. And if you're someone who's always tried to change your downward angle of attack, which is quite common with amateurs, to an upward angle but not really succeeded, we're going to delve deep into why that might be, give you some drills to try and help you improve that, and talk about some of the reasons why it might be better for you to hit up rather than down with your driver when it comes to trying to hit it a bit longer. So when I hit my drivers, I tend to be a natural hit up at the ball, so my club is travelling up as it strikes the ball. Lots of students I teach over the years, definitely there's a lot of students struggling with hitting down and even slightly to the left. Now why is this important? It's important because if you think about it, I'm trying to launch my ball in the air. So if my angle of attack in any way as it hits that ball is going towards the way I want to launch the ball, I'm going to get less deflection. The club's got loft. So if I'm hitting down, presenting loft, that's going to increase a thing called spin loft. It increases deflection, so you get more spin, you're going to get less energy transfer to the ball, you're going to leave distance, yards on the table that you might need. Now with my club head speeds, which aren't particularly fast, for me to hit up or down is really going to change my distance by about 25 yards. So if I want to get the most out of my tee shots with my speed, and to be fair, with all of our speeds, hitting up is going to be so much more beneficial. Let's go inside to the studio and delve deep into why you might be struggling to hit up and keep hitting down at that ball and getting kind of spinny to the right shots. 3 tips. Let's get that club to the ground earlier. So I'm going to hit 2 shots here. I'm going to hit one shot where I put very flat wrist angles in. So I'm going to feel on my backswing, I flatten my lead wrist with my arm, even slightly bow it. So put it into flexion. And then another swing, I'm going to put lots of extension in, what people know as cupping that lead wrist. Watch what it does to my angle of attack. So first one, I'm going to start with extension in this lead wrist, which you should do if your grip's in a neutral position. And I'm just going to keep it in there. Shots functional in the fact that it's hitting target. Angle of attack 3.6 down. Next swing I'm going to start extended lead wrist. So it's extended, but I'm going to take all that extension out. Flatten that lead wrist, even go into flexion if I can. For all intents and purposes, everything else is very much the same. Just going to use different wrist angles. So it's a little bit further left. I'm not going at speed because I'm just trying to play with wrist angles, but you can see the different shape in that shot. And now we're 2 up with my angle of attack. That got the club to the ground earlier. By playing with your wrist angles, you're playing with loft. The loft of the club is being manipulated as it spins around your body. Often this is referred to so much as open and close, which I understand, but it doesn't help people as much as thinking about loft. The more I find turn my wrist this way and take loft off, the more sense it makes to get the club lower and hit up at the ball, because I'm taking loft off. So I want to launch it. The more I'm putting extension in my lead wrist, so the more I'm cupping it, the more I'm holding on to that angle that was in there at the beginning, the more I feel like if I don't hit down at this ball, it's just going to literally pop up in the air and off to the right. One of the biggest things you learn of coaching over many years is that golfers are so good at responding to the angles they put in. They just put angles in that don't make sense as the handicaps go up and up and up and up and up, as a general rule. So if I use the wrist angles from a neutral grip position that encourage the angle of attack, which is more down, low cut, I would also be doing it the other way. Dropping that club lower and hitting up wouldn't work. You've got to be functional. So if your grip is anywhere near a neutral position, which for lots of golfers is where you'd be taught to try and play from, first port of call for getting that club lowered and change the angle of attack to try and help add that distance and launch is actually to feel like your wrist angles are staying flatter with lead wrist, even slightly bowing, backswing and downswing. This now will make sense. It gives you the right to try and hit up and out of that ball. So just a little note in here. When you watch golfers on tour, you're going to see DJ-like wrists, you're going to see Webb Simpson kind of cupped wrist, Ryan Fox who we played with, very extended lead wrist at the top of his backswing. Remember, these ideas are based on a neutral grip. The wrist angles that you see at the top will be based on the matchups of where you start. But if you're starting, like I said, with a relatively neutral grip, and you're struggling to hit up, flattening that lead wrist, taking all that extension out on the way back and the way down will definitely give you the green light to start trying to hit up at the ball. Tip number 2 for trying to hit that ball more on the way up is trying to undo people's perceptions of the ideas of lag in the golf swing. So these ideas of hanging on to angles for a long time to increase speed, which I've got another video coming with Bryson's wrist angles soon, which will blow your head off of what he does in the ideas of holding angles and taking them out, has been harming golfers and still does for so many years. So let's talk ulnar deviation, so wrist bending down to the ground, v radial, where you're starting to hinge the club up in the air. Now in the comments down below, when I'm in my setup position, is my lead wrist, my left wrist, is it bent down to the ground or bent up in the air? So is it in ulnar or is it in radial? In those comments. Go on, what do you put? Did you hit the like button while you're down there so you get to see more of these tips if you want to see more of them? Don't be afraid to subscribe as well so you don't miss a great free golf lesson. Ulnar is the correct answer. The only way that club gets on the ground because you bend your wrist down to put it on the ground. So where moving loft with flattening lead wrist or extending it changes the loft of the club, which then encourages you to get the club lower. Ulnar deviation radial, so hinging up and down, is what actually is picking that club up in the air and putting it on the ground. And if you look at professionals' golf swings with 3D motion capture, you will be amazed how quickly the majority of them get into ulnar deviation, hinging down to the ground, early on the downswing. I start with my wrist hinged down to the ground. I tend to put the club up in my air. Some people actually stay in ulnar, believe it or not, but they have a little bit of radial as a general rule. Certainly deviate from ulnar deviation down to the ground. No one's up there with loads of down to the ground angle, so they are straightening it up with the lead arm. For me, I get into ulnar on my downswing about here. So I'm already starting to let all these angles undo to try and get that club low. So as I get down to last parallel, basically I'm pretty much in my ulnar deviation that I want to be to hit the ball. I'm not far off it to let that club go. I'm trying to get that club lower to the ground earlier. No way am I staying in radial. All these tips for years, so many people are just like, I don't know where all the apologies are for all these kind of lessons where people are trying to do this. Trying to get in ulnar quicker is the best fix for trying to get people to hit up. Like, it just light bulb fixes them. So simple ideas. There's a door behind me on kind of about, let's say on a clock face, if you're at 12 o'clock, it's at 2 o'clock. So once you get to the top of your backswing, throw that club to 2 o'clock, throw it back and down like you're casting it, all the things you're taught not to do and all the things lots of people still think they shouldn't do. Chuck it back there to get that club getting down to the ground earlier so you can turn through and up. It makes a massive difference into angle of attacks. It makes a massive difference into how far people hit the ball. When you do this with students, what happens is they say, I can't do that, it feels weak, it won't go anywhere. You start measuring them. Often they actually start swinging it faster. For the ones who swing the same speed, because they're hitting up rather than down, we can get up to like 25 yards extra distance if everything else is in place. Because their club face is better controlled as well, so they're not adding loft. Remember, if we've got the flatter lead wrist, they're taking loft off while putting that ulnar in early on the way down. They're now hitting with less loft on the way up. We start getting lower spins, higher ball speeds, longer shots. It blows students' heads off because it's the 9 times out of 10 comment to this tip is they go, that's unbelievable. Like, why haven't I not done that years ago? Because I've been thinking that I should hold on to lag and those kind of ideas. It destroys people's chances of hitting to their potential for the speed they put in. You start in ulnar. You hit the ball in ulnar deviation on that lead wrist. Getting into ulnar earlier allows you plenty of time to line CGs up a club, get your ground pressures off the ground all working to hit sweeter shots. The more you hold on to radial, the more you hold on to angles, you won't be able to push on the ground, you'll stall with your lower body as you now try and line things up in an emergency action down at the bottom, and we definitely see crashes from those actions. Last tip, simple setup and swing fort tip. So let's make sure you've got some good tilts in there. So if I put the ball up and towards my lead foot with my driver, what happens right hand below left, I'm gonna have a natural amount of body tilt. So right shoulder lower than left. As I make my backswing, if I maintain a little bit of that tilt and then on my downswing, keep that tilt in there and even increase it. So get a bit of separation with the lower half going forward and turning as the upper half stays back. This is great for allowing me to get that club down earlier and hit up. Common fault I see with students is they go onto their right foot on the backswing, quite heavy, and then as they start taking the club behind the head, they get very much back on their left, which they now are stuck to try and hit it, unless they want to go back right, which some do. but that gets really complicated. So from here, all I can do is bury my pressures down on that left foot, rotate. That club's so late in coming down to the ground, I'm hitting down to the left, crashing, horrible low cuts, big slices, low left if the face isn't right. Getting in a lot of trouble. A few tilts. Just make sure your upper body is tilting behind that ball. As you make your backswing, feel like you're still slightly tilted behind it. As you make your downswing and pressures start moving onto that lead foot, just keep that left ear on the ball to allow you to get that club down to the ground earlier and have a feeling of hitting up and letting that ball fly out in front of you. Again, remember, if the other wrist angles aren't in place, this won't work. Because at the end of the day, it's all matchups. Like I said earlier, you're much cleverer at working it out than you think. You're just not working it out in a functional way for golf. So if I'm adding loft, poor wrist angles, loading on my lead foot on the backswing and staying there, makes sense because I need to be hitting down and left to try and manage the face that's open to a path and extra loft to get anything out of it. Wrist angles in place, bit of ulnar and radial understanding on the backswing, downswing, putting tilts in as well will make sense. Where people often go wrong is they put the tilts in because they've watched it in a video or they've not had a one-to-one lesson. Like, I hope this video is helping, but one-to-one lessons rule. This is just something that you could take to a one-to-one lesson, hopefully. Tilts nicely in place, poor wrist angles, trying to tilt, keeping those poor wrist angles in there, holding on, not understanding the ulnar, extending lead wrist. Oh my word, you want to see bad shots? There's your bad shot. Like, see you later, balls. Give those drills a go. Let me know if it helps in the comments down below. Remember to hit that subscribe button. If you want to see more tips, let me know as well down in that comments section what tips you might want to see more of. Definitely getting hold of your angle of attack, even if it means hitting 6 down to only 2 down with these tips, can really help you squeeze a bit more yardage out. And hopefully as well, start getting more out of these expensive drivers that we're all buying.